Dr. K.U. Nadrajan, Professor and Head, EP Division, Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Kochi. Dr. K.U. Nadrajan did his MBBS and MD at the Madras Medical College. He did his DM Cardiology at the prestigious Sri Chitra Thirunal Institute for Medical Science and Technology, Trivandrum. Dr. K.U. Nadrajan is an A-stud clinician, reputed teacher, and his area of special interest is cardiac electrophysiology apart from interventional cardiology. We heartily welcome you, sir.
The topic coined is drugs, ICD, and catheter ablation. What is the role of each of these entities in a patient with a post-MI scar VT? When and why? What is the rationale? And when I say post-MI scar VT, it is with reference to a patient who has already had an episode of monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, complicating a post-myocardial infarction. So this is essentially to talk about secondary prophylaxis rather than primary prophylaxis, because the subset I'm talking about is a patient who has already had a ventricular tachycardia. So we'll briefly go through what is scar VT and the mechanism, which has already been described by Dr. Sam in his talk. The fundamental role of the implantable cardioverter defibrillator after an episode of sustained post-myocardial scar VT. The importance of antiarrhythmic drugs as an useful adjuvant therapy after the implantation of an ICD to reduce VT recurrence and to reduce the amount of appropriate device interventions. What are the limitations of antiarrhythmic drugs, their toxicity, so on and so forth. The role of catheter ablation in scar VT, when, why, and how. A few case scenarios to emphasize these points as we go along. And a brief look at the guidelines and recommendations for us to rely upon. So this is an example of an LV angiogram in the RIO projection. All of us are familiar with. It shows significant wall motion abnormality due to an old anterior wall MI. You can see a dyskinetic apex with probably an apical thrombus and organized apical thrombus and almost an akinetic anterolateral segment. Severe LV dysfunction complicating an old anterior wall myocardial infarction. And Dr. Sam also referred to, this is a scar of an autopsy specimen of a patient who has had an anterior and an anteroseptal wall myocardial infarction. You can see the scar here. As he described, there are islands of surviving myocardium in between the scar, and that sets the stage for that is so-called border zone or area of slow conduction, which is primarily responsible for setting up a re-entry in the region of the scar. So the surviving muscle bundles in between scars is called the border zone or areas of very slow conduction, and they are responsible for setting up the re-entry. And it is these islands of surviving muscle bundles, which is the target for radiofrequency ablation to eliminate or reduce the incidence of scar ventricular tachycardia, complicating a whole myocardial infarction. And we are all familiar with this kind of a ECG, a patient coming with a monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, complicating a whole myocardial infarction. And that is because of this re-entry around the scar. What are the treatments to reduce the risk of sudden cardiac death? One has to, of course, correct ischemia by doing revascularization, beta blocker, preventing plaque rupture with statins, ACE inhibitors, aspirin, stabilizing autonomic balance by beta blockers, ACE inhibitors. In other words, there is a lot of role for drugs like beta blockers, ACE inhibitors in preventing sudden cardiac death in patients with post-MI LV dysfunction. One should not forget the fact that beta blockers and ACE inhibitors have a potential role to play. Even for that matter, aldosterone receptor blockers also play a major role in reducing the risk of sudden cardiac death. Prevention of arrhythmia can be by beta blocker, amiodarone, implantable defibrillators which treat the arrhythmia should it happen, and radiofrequency ablation in refractory cases. So that brings about the triad of drugs, implantable cardioverter defibrillators, and catheter ablations. All these play a role in patients with scar ventricular tachycardia. We'll go through a couple of cases. A 73-year-old male with an old inferior wall MI more than 10 years ago, triple vessel disease. He was advised CABG, he refused. He presented with a recurrent monomorphic VT needing cardioversion. He was in pulmonary edema. He had to be mechanically ventilated. He was stabilized with amiodarone beta blocker. He was referred for further management. There was moderate LV dysfunction with ejection fraction of 45%. So here is the patient with the whole myocardial infarction, moderate LV dysfunction, and documented recurrent monomorphic ventricular tachycardia, which was hemodynamically unstable. And he was stabilized with drugs. When he came to us, he was VT free. And this was the monomorphic ventricular tachycardia ECG from the outside hospital. And this is the ECG during sinus rhythm. You can see deep Q waves in the inferior leads, an early transition in V2, which are signs of old infero-posterior myocardial infarction. And what is the recommendation? In patients with ischemic heart disease who either survive sudden cardiac arrest or who experience hemodynamically unstable VT or even stable sustained ventricular tachycardia not due to reversible causes. Even if the patient is stable during the ventricular tachycardia, ICD is recommended. Class of recommendation is 1. So this patient is a candidate for an ICD implantation. If you look at the flow diagram, in secondary prevention of patients with ischemic heart disease who had either survived a cardiac arrest or who had a sustained spontaneous monomorphic VT, stable or unstable does not matter. Here, ejection fraction is not the criterion. That's what I wanted to say. Unlike primary prophylaxis where ejection fraction is a criterion, here ejection fraction is not the criterion. And if ischemia requires revascularization, that has to be done. If there is no need for a revascularization, if the patient is an ICD candidate with a expected survival more than 1 year, he becomes a candidate for an ICD implantation. So this patient underwent a single chamber ICD implantation. He was continued on oral amiodarone and beta blocker. On 1 month follow-up, there were no further VT episodes. ICD is implanted under the left collarbone. Through the subclavian vein, a lead is positioned. And this is how the device looks like. It is done by a procedure with an incision in the pectoral region. It is done under local anesthesia. It does not require general anesthesia in most of the cases. A venous access is taken. The lead is positioned in the right ventricle. This is the device being kept inside the pocket which is fashioned. And this is the incision which is closed. And this is the fluoroscopy of the single chamber ICD that you see here, which is positioned in the right ventricle. This is the place where we had the excellent signals. And how does an ICD work? Should a monomorphic VT happen, the ICD tries anti-tachycardia pacing by pacing the ventricle at a rate faster than that of the VT, and it can terminate. That's called overdrive termination. This is what the ICD tries first. And if the overdrive pacing does not work, and if the VT continues, a cardioversion shock is delivered and sinus rhythm can be restored. And if it is a ventricular fibrillation, as you can see here, the defibrillator gives a defibrillation shock and sinus rhythm can be restored. In this case, a brief paced rhythm followed by sinus rhythm. So that's how the ICD works. The ICD constantly monitors the rhythm and treats accordingly. Case number 2, a 65-year-old male with old myocardial infarction, severe LV dysfunction, ejection fraction 30%. He presented more than 10 years ago with documented recurrent sustained VT, multiple cardioversions. He was referred for further treatment. On admission to our institution, he was in incessant monomorphic VT, refractory to antiarrhythmic drugs, overdrive pacing, and all the usual measures. He was having recurrent VT. He was all the time in VT. He was seldom in sinus rhythm, and the VT rate was not very fast, but he was in VT all the time. And this is the ECG of the ventricular tachycardia. And this is the coronary angiogram showing diffuse triple vessel disease with very poor quality target vessels. He was not willing for revascularization also. And the right coronary artery was totally occluded, and we saw it collateralized by the left system. And that was his LV angiogram. You can see that the diaphragmatic surface of the left ventricle is completely akinetic. That is the LAO view, showing posterior wall almost dyskinetic. And this was the VT when we took him to the EP lab. He was taken up for an EP study. because he was in incessant ventricular tachycardia. When somebody has incessant ventricular tachycardia, one should not put a defibrillator, because the defibrillator will have multiple appropriate shocks. It reduces the longevity of the device, and it's a very unpleasant feeling for the patient. So when there is incessant VT, you should address the ventricular tachycardia either by drugs, and if it is drug refractory, you should ablate the patient before putting the patient on a defibrillator. And this is the RF catheter in the left ventricle in the posterior region. We had fractionated signals. We didn't have a 3D mapping at that time. We had fractionated signals, and entrainment mapping showed that we are in the site of the VT circuit. And we ablated the ventricular tachycardia, and the ablation here terminated the ventricular tachycardia. We saw sinus rhythm for the very first time after this procedure. And after the VT was ablated, whatever stimulation protocol was done, we could not induce the ventricular tachycardia. And he subsequently underwent a dual chamber ICD implantation. And this is the sinus rhythm ECG showing deep Q waves in the inferior leads, and again early transition in V2. So this was a case of an old inferior MI who presented with an incessant monomorphic VT refractory to medications, underwent successful RF ablation in 2009. VT was not reinducible post RFA. However, we should implant an ICD because there can be another circuit which can wake up later on. So the defibrillator was implanted, and he has not had a single shock in the last 13 years of follow-up. So to go by the recommendations, any patient with ischemic heart disease with recurrent ventricular arrhythmia with significant symptoms or ICD shocks, despite optimal device programming and ongoing treatment with the beta blocker, they should be subjected to amiodarone or sotalol is useful to suppress the ventricular arrhythmia. And if they are drug refractory, an ablation, catheter ablation should be considered. And what is more important is, in patients with incessant VT or VF, an ICD should not be implanted. It is a class 3 recommendation until sufficient control of the ventricular arrhythmia is achieved to prevent repeated ICD shocks. Case 3, a 72-year-old male, old extensive anterior MI in 1983, subsequently had a re-anterior wall MI. He underwent PTCA in the past, severe LV dysfunction, EF 35%, documented sustained VT with hemodynamic collapse. He underwent cardioversion in 2013, and subsequently in 2013, he had a single chamber ICD implantation. And this was the VT ECG. This is the sinus rhythm ECG showing old anterior MI pattern. He had recurrent appropriate ICD therapy, multiple shocks in 2015, 2018. He was put on amiodarone, beta blocker. He continued to have repeated appropriate ICD shocks. Mexiletine was subsequently added in 2019. And in spite of this combination of amiodarone, beta blocker, and add-on mexiletine, this patient had an arrhythmic storm with 14 shocks on a single day in the March of 2019. He was taken up for an EP study RF ablation as an adjuvant treatment to reduce the appropriate ICD shocks by reducing the incidence of recurrence of VT. He had a large scar in the anterior wall and the septum. As you can see here, the gray is the scar. We gave RF ablation targeting the area of border zones with typical late potential, etc., as a marker of slow conduction tissue, which was shown in the initial diagram. This is the other view, the RAO view. These are the dots are the ablation points. And follow-up after 1 year, not a single ICD therapy thereafter. So if you look at a patient with ICD implantation with recurrent ventricular arrhythmia, sustained monomorphic VT, amiodarone or sotalol is class 1 recommendation. And if the arrhythmia is not controlled, and if the patient is in a VT storm, it's a class 1 recommendation for catheter ablation. So our patient belongs to this category. So case 1 was an old myocardial infarction, sustained monomorphic VT, and he underwent a single an ICD implantation for secondary prophylaxis. The case 2 was an arrhythmic storm, incessant VT, successful RF ablation, followed by ICD and no episodes thereafter. The third case was an old MI, severe LV dysfunction with ventricular tachycardia, had an ICD, had recurrent appropriate ICD shocks, refractory to multiple antiarrhythmic medications, underwent RF ablation, and subsequently no ICD therapy, to highlight the role of adjuvant medications as well as catheter ablation to reduce VT recurrence. ICD shocks are life-saving, but not without harm. Every effort must be made to reduce shock burden. That is very, very important. If you look at the prognostic implications of ICD shocks in the SCUD-F data, which is a primary prophylaxis trial, a post-analysis of this trial clearly showed that appropriate or inappropriate shocks increases the hazard of death. Whether it is appropriate, whether it is inappropriate, more the number of shocks, the hazard is even more. So shocks increase the risk of death in patients with ICD. And not only it increases death in patients with ICD, it has an adverse impact on the quality of life. All the yardsticks of quality of life is adversely affected by shocks in a patient with ICD. So how do we reduce shocks in a patient with ICD? One, you can program the device programming using special algorithms to reduce shock burden in VT. If you look at the SCUD-F data, 2/3 of shocks are appropriate, whereas 1/3 of shocks can be appropriate due to SVT like atrial fibrillation, oversensing due to noise, for instance, or non-sustained episodes of ventricular tachycardia. So these can be classified as inappropriate shocks, and the 2/3 are due to real VTVF, which can be appropriate shocks. So a lot can be done to reduce inappropriate shocks by programming the ICD. And to discriminate between SVT and VT, we have special algorithms like morphology criteria, onset criteria. Sinus tachycardia is an automatic rhythm, so there is a slow onset, whereas a VT has a sudden onset. And also stability criterion to differentiate between atrial fibrillation with ventricular tachycardia. So these are some of the device algorithms to differentiate SVT versus ventricular tachycardia. As I told you, some of the ICD intervention due to non-sustained ventricular tachycardia. So you can increase the number of intervals needed to detect ventricular arrhythmia. And also you can use anti-tachycardia overdrive pacing algorithm, even in a tachycardia which is very fast. In the ventricular fibrillation zone, a lot of ventricular fibrillation zone arrhythmias can actually be fast ventricular tachycardia, and an anti-tachycardia pacing itself can terminate some of these arrhythmias and can minimize shocks. So these algorithms can be employed judiciously to reduce ICD shocks. So these are device-based algorithms. Drugs to reduce arrhythmia recurrence. The drug which was tried in this particular trial, which was reported in 1999 in the NEJM, is comparing sotalol with placebo. Sotalol definitely reduced the risk of shocks in patients with ICD implantation. This trial is 2006. It's called the OPTIC trial, which compared beta blocker alone, amiodarone plus beta blocker, or sotalol. There are 3 arms of interventions in this particular trial. Amiodarone plus beta blocker had the best result. Sotalol was intermediary, and beta blocker alone was insufficient. So amiodarone beta blocker is one of the most efficient combinations in preventing recurrence from the point of view of antiarrhythmic drugs. And in this systematic review also, amiodarone was the most useful drug, and sotalol was superior compared to placebo. So sotalol is definitely a drug which can be considered in those patients where amiodarone has to be stopped because of toxicity. But when a patient can tolerate amiodarone, amiodarone is the most efficient drug. Now, this particular concept, escalation of antiarrhythmic drugs versus radiofrequency ablation for recurrent VT. Somebody has an ICD, comes with recurrent episodes of ventricular tachycardia, needing ICD shocks. Should you escalate the antiarrhythmic drug, or should you subject them to radiofrequency ablation? Was analyzed in this very good trial called the VANISH trial. Again, the results of which was published in the NEJM 4 years ago. 259 patients with recurrent VT on antiarrhythmic drugs were randomized to either catheter ablation or to escalation of drug therapy. What do you mean by escalation? When a patient is not on amiodarone, 400 milligram BD for 2 weeks, 400 milligram OD for the next 4 weeks, and thereafter a maintenance dose of 200 milligram OD. If somebody is on less than 300 mg, again a loading dose of 400 milligram twice daily followed by 300 milligram. Somebody who was already on 300 milligram, continue 300 milligram and add on mexiletine was the protocol followed in the escalated drug therapy arm. Mean follow-up of about 27 months. The composite of death, appropriate ICD shock, or VT storm was the primary outcome. The primary outcome was definitely better with the catheter ablation group, though it was largely driven by reduction in the storm as well as in the appropriate shock and not in mortality. So there was a role for considering catheter ablation over escalated drug therapy arm. What is the downside of drug therapy? All of us rely on antiarrhythmic drug therapy as the first line of action to prevent VT recurrence in a patient with a defibrillator. What are the downsides? All of us know that there are a host of side effects of drugs like amiodarone, pulmonary toxicity, hepatic toxicity, thyroid toxicity, skin toxicity, so on and so forth. And these are the recommendations for follow-up of a patient on amiodarone. We won't go into the details for want of time. I want to tell you that if you look at the SCUDF data, amiodarone had placebo-like mortality or even more than placebo, though not statistically significant. This is the ICD arm, which was distinctly superior. The blue is amiodarone, and amiodarone had significantly higher mortality, almost like placebo. So amiodarone alone did not make a difference in comparison to ICD. One of the reasons why amiodarone can make things worse is it can slow the VT. The VT can become slow, as in this case, 125 per minute, and it becomes incessant. Slow VTs are known to be incessant. So that is one of the reasons. And there can be a worsening of pump function with amiodarone also. So what is the stepwise approach to antiarrhythmic therapy in patients with ICD with LV dysfunction? Beta blocker is step number 1. 200 milligram daily of amiodarone is step number 2. If the patient is stable for 1 year, consider discontinuation of amiodarone, meaning try to discontinue amiodarone as early as possible, definitely not more than 1 year. If there is recurrence on 200 milligram, you can escalate to 300 to 400 milligram. Again, if the patient remains stable, try to reduce the dose. So reduce the dose or discontinue amiodarone if the condition permits, because long-term amiodarone is not a good thing to do. And if the patient continues to have VT recurrence despite high-dose amiodarone, consider VT ablation. The point to emphasize is the aim should be to withdraw or minimize amiodarone and definitely not continue amiodarone beyond 1 year if feasible. And that is how catheter ablation comes to our rescue. This has already been stressed. The areas of border zones where there is slow conduction, you have these late potentials these are the diastolic potentials during ventricular tachycardia, and these border zones are the target for ablation. As you can see here, these are the scar tissue. Within the scar tissue, you have signals which are characteristic of the surviving muscle bundles having late potentials, etc. And during ablation, the VT terminates. How early should RF ablation be considered in post-ICD patients? Should you eternally postpone radiofrequency ablation by trying drugs for a long time, or should you subject them to ablation earlier? This was looked at in this particular trial, early referral versus late referral. RF ablation definitely reduced the amiodarone requirement as well as the VT events. However, if you classify them as early ablation versus late ablation, the group with early ablation were more, they had higher VT-free survival, making it a case for earlier referral for ablation rather than wait for a burnt out stage of the disease. This is a more recent analysis. As you can see here, this is early ablation, this is late ablation. Acute results are not very different, whereas acute complications are definitely more with late referral for ablation, as well as VT freedom is more with early referral. So early referral is superior to late referral. So it makes sense to continue to consider ablation early in the course of the disease rather than wait for the disease to become end stage when ablation becomes more complicated. The acute results are less results are less optimal, and there are more chances of VT recurrence despite ablation if you subject them to late ablation. So I'll conclude by saying that sustained VT in a post-MI scar is an indication for ICD implantation, even if the patient has a stable VT during presentation, and even if the ejection fraction is 40%, 45%, it becomes a candidate for ICD implantation. ICD therapy, particularly shocks, though appropriate, are associated with higher mortality, frequent hospitalizations, and poor quality of life. Every effort must be made to reduce ICD shocks. Device reprogramming can help reduce shocks, both appropriate and inappropriate. Antiarrhythmic drugs like amiodarone, beta blockers, sotalol are the first line of therapy to reduce arrhythmic burden. Long-term antiarrhythmic drug therapy has its issues of toxicity. Radiofrequency ablation reduces VT recurrence and is an useful adjunct in post-ICD patients with drug refractory arrhythmia, like the third case that we saw. It is better to consider radiofrequency ablation earlier in drug refractory ventricular arrhythmia rather than wait for the disease to become too late in the day to improve success and reduce complications. Needless to say, guideline directed medical therapy like beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist, statin to stabilize plaques, etc. for heart failure is of utmost importance, and one should not lose sight of these guideline directed medical therapy in the desire to implant ICDs and continue antiarrhythmic drug therapy. Thank you for your kind attention.